Hello and welcome to the Medical Sales Podcast, and I am your host, Samuel. In this podcast, I interview top medical sales reps and leading medical sales executives across the entire country. And it doesn't matter what medical sales industry, from medical device to pharmaceutical to genetic testing to diagnostic lab, you name it. You will learn how to either break into the industry, be a top 5% performer within your role in sales, or climb the corporate ladder. Welcome to the Medical Sales Podcast. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining me today on the Medical Sales Podcast. And I have a guest that I'm very excited to introduce. His name is Bryan Martray, and he has, in my opinion, one of the coolest jobs you can have. So he is in DBS. That's deep brain stimulation. It's implant devices right into the brain. And I'm not going to talk all about what he's going to talk about when we get to the interview. But what I want to highlight, some things that he did talk about in this interview and that I really want everyone listening to pay attention to, is he cited some things that are really important. And one of those things he cited is extreme ownership in where you are. And that's something that he has truly utilized as far as he can in every role he's been given the opportunity to take, all the way to where he is today. And that's also something that I think we should all take time to process. Extreme ownership in where you are. So many people listening are either wanting to get into devices, medical devices or pharmaceutical sales or some other type of medical sales, or want to transition within their role to a different field, or want to transition to a different industry altogether. And you spend so much time focusing on where you want to go, right? And you think about, okay, this needs to happen, and I need to do that, and do this, and contact this person, and understand this, and work this strategy. But you can't forget that there's power in where you are, and there's power in owning exactly where you are, and making sure that's communicated to anyone that can give you the opportunity that you want to take. And that's something that Bryan addresses. I love how he gets into it. He also says another thing that I want to talk about before you hear the interview, about how use stress as an ally. In deep brain stimulation, it's a high stress environment, a lot of mental stress, and he's found ways to use it to serve him. I think it's so appropriate, especially now when we're in these quarantine times and we're dealing with a pandemic that we're all still learning how to navigate. All that stress that's being caused from not knowing how to do something and being so uncertain on where things are going to end up. We got to think about how we can use that stress as your ally. It's almost along the lines of that concept of getting comfortable in the discomfort. And when you can really hone that and exercise that, not only do you turn whatever current problems you're experiencing into testimonials, you also find ways to see what's coming and put yourself out there and be really bold in anything you want to go out and do. These are things that Bryan touched on. It's so great to hear it, and it's so insightful. And, I really want everyone listening to pay attention to that ownership, pay attention to when he talks about stress, and also pay attention to what he thematically mentions with growth. He definitely shows a theme of growth through every transition he's experienced. So I'll say no more. I'm not trying to build up the pressure here, and I'm not trying to cause any anxiety, but I'm excited for this guest. So I really wanted to just mention some things before you hear the interview. So here's the interview. I hope you enjoy it. And again, thank you for listening to the Medical Sales Podcast. So before we get started, I have a couple programs that show you exactly how to break into the medical sales industry. Become a top-performing medical sales professional and masterfully navigate your career to executive-level leadership. Visit evolveyoursuccess.com to find out more. Hey, Bryan, how are you today?
Doing good, sir. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for being on the show. Everyone, this is Bryan Martray. He's actually a deep brain stimulation sales representative for Medtronic, and he's coming from Tulsa, Oklahoma. So Bryan, once again, how is the day going?
Good so far. This is kind of a slow Friday. It's been kind of crazy since everything's ramped back up post-COVID. So I'm getting caught up on some office things and some virtual trainings we have with the company today and doing this also. So it's been a good Friday so far.
That's actually a good question to start with. How has COVID affected your business and what's changed that allows you to get back into the field now?
Yeah, so when everything first started going down, they canceled most of my elective surgeries. DBS, of course, is an elective surgery. So any new patient implants that we had coming up, those were pushed off. I had some battery replacements. So patients that were already implanted, their batteries were getting low. Went ahead and did those, but there for about a month and a half, there wasn't much going on. Most of my referring neurology offices were closed, so nobody was seeing patients. But now things are opened back up and these patients are coming in and surgery schedules are getting pretty crazy again, which is a good thing. So I'm happy to see it.
Got it. Yeah, I can imagine. So implants, brain stimulation, neurology, you threw out some words out there that everyone's dying to know more about. So tell us, what type of field are you in? Tell us a little bit about deep brain stimulation.
Yeah, so DBS is part of our neuromodulation division. And essentially, just to keep it simple, DBS is a small pacemaker-like device under the skin of the chest that sends electrical signals through leads that are implanted in certain targets of the brain that affect movement. And then we send signals to those areas of the brain to hopefully alleviate or totally eliminate the symptoms that are caused by movement disorders such as Parkinson's, essential tremor, and so on.
Wow, fascinating stuff. So I have to ask, going back to when you started, going back to even when you were a little boy, did you say that you want to grow up to be a deep brain stimulation sales rep?
No. I want to be an astronaut or something cool, But even in high school in small town America where I went to high school, nobody talked about sales or being a sales rep,
Sure.
Or advice rep or pharma rep. That was nowhere on my radar.
So then how'd you fall into it? Take us back. You graduated high school. I'm sure you were take us back to high school. What were you doing when you went into college? What did you think you'd be doing and how did you get here?
Yeah, so I graduated high school and really didn't know what I wanted to do. But through part of high school and even through my first couple of years of college, I worked at an imaging clinic that my aunt managed for years. So I was around the medical imaging world, radiologists, X-ray techs, MRI techs, CT techs, et cetera. So I knew that business. And, the thing out of high school was to get a job after college and make good money. What it means. So I pursued, kind of the path of least resistance, I think, and just went to college to be an X-ray technologist, to work in medical imaging. Did that, got out of school in 2008. And up until 2015, I worked as an MRI tech at a small outpatient radiology clinic in Tulsa.
Okay. And then from the MRI clinic, how'd you bridge that gap into medical devices?
Yeah, so about 2015, I was just really feeling like I don't want to do this for the rest of my life. Some people do, and that's fine. They find fulfillment in it, but it wasn't challenging me. I talked to my manager there, and we talked about some things I could pursue in that company, and they actually offered me a job in Denver to take over a new imaging clinic that was opening there. And so I flew up and talked to them and just really wasn't feeling it. Wasn't my thing. Denver really wasn't my scene.
Sure.
I didn't want to raise my family there. So I came back, and shortly after that, there was actually a Medtronic neuromodulation rep on our spinal pain side that came to the clinic to talk about the MRI conditionality of their devices. And so afterwards, I chatted with her and just talked a little bit about Medtronic and how she got into the business. And she pointed me some directions. And so I applied and put her name as a reference on one of our clinical specialist positions. One thing led to another. I got an interview that I kind of thought went terrible, but I got a second interview. Like I said, one thing led to another. Got some in-person interviews, and there I was at Medtronic. So,
wow. Not too many people can say interview did not go well, but it actually did, and they just got the position on the first try. So that's impressive. Amazing stroke of luck to get you that opportunity. So then you became a lead, or you became a clinical specialist, and then what happened after that?
Yeah, so I was a clinical specialist in our neurosurgery navigation division. So anything involved with brain surgery or spine surgery, I was running those cases for the reps, training the surgeons or the staff on the technology. Wasn't totally involved with DBS at that point. Did that for a year or so, I think. And we had some employee changes in our team. that kind of created a vacuum in our DBS team. And so they sent me to training. And at that point, I just kind of fell in love with technology and saw what it was really about and how it helped the patients. Was able to meet some patients and fell in love with them and knew that's the direction I wanted to go. Did that for a while, was a clinical specialist in our DBS world. And then I was I think it was at a training, or maybe I was helping cover a case out of state somewhere. I don't really remember. So I was talking to this guy at a training, I think is what it was, and asked him about how I transitioned from the clinical specialist to a sales rep role. And I don't think he meant it this way, but he kind of laughed and just said, that's not really why you were hired. You were hired as a clinical specialist. We don't really do that at Medtronic. And I think that was more of his personal opinion. Now I see that's not really the vision of Medtronic. But, I took it personal. I took it as a challenge. And I decided then, you know what? I am going to be a sales rep.
You're going to make it happen. Okay.
In Medtronic. And so at that point, I tried to position myself any way I could and work as hard as I could with my customers and my internal customers and colleagues and position myself for the job. And one thing led to another. I was then given the associate sales rep role for just right at a year. Had to check some boxes, and then I was, awarded this full line sales rep role for DBS.
Excellent. And how would you compare where you are now as a sales rep, being on the other side, to where you were as a lead clinical specialist?
Yeah, I think as a clinical specialist, you kind of develop this attitude that you know what it's like on the other side.
Okay.
You're essentially doing the job to a point. But once you transition over and you have that number over your head and you have to start having harder conversations with the customers, it's a different feeling when you wake up in the morning and you have to adapt and you have to channel that. So
yeah, you're running a business. Your own business.
Exactly.
Okay. All right. So you mentioned some things here that I want to get into. You talked about a team. So help our audience understand, what does a team actually consist of when it comes to DBS, deep brain stimulation?
Yeah, so DBS, especially the first part of the surgery, what we call stage 1, which is the initial implant. So the initial lead implants in the brain. It's a super technical procedure. It's not a very hard procedure, but there's hundreds of steps that go into it. And each one has to go nearly perfect for the patient to have a good outcome. So the first thing we want to do is identify that the patient's a perfect candidate. That's done by way of the neurologist, the neurosurgeon, and then we can interject and talk about it with us as reps also. We're available to help in any way we can. So we identify the patient is a good candidate. They're sent for an MRI. So the imaging department's a part of the team. The MRIs have to be done a special way, usually under sedation, because at that point, the patient's still, tremoring from their disease. And then we sit down with the neurosurgeon and we make a surgical plan and make a trajectory in the brain. And we try to identify the best targets for this patient. And then, surgery day is here. The nurses, us as reps, the scrub techs, the imaging techs, everybody's involved to make this patient's day go perfect and try to have a nearly perfect outcome.
Wow. It sounds like such a coordinated effort. Who's running point on this coordination? Is it the surgeon? Is it someone else?
Yeah, I think the surgeon, of course, is running point, but as a rep with your technology involved in the OR, you're right there behind them, and you're doing everything that you can do to keep the room, running smoothly, even though that may not be your job, but
Sure.
You have a part in that. Try to stay, 10 steps ahead of the surgeon and anticipate things and fix problems before they happen.
I hope you're enjoying today's episode. And I want to let you know that I have a couple of programs that show you exactly how to break into the medical sales industry, become a top-performing medical sales professional, and masterfully navigate your career to executive level leadership. Visit evolveyoursuccess.com to find out more. Wow, it sounds like a type of role that's all engaging. Like you have to be present. You have to be present, it sounds like. So talk to us a little bit about this type of career. I mean, and when I say career, I'm speaking specifically to DBS. It really sounds like gratifying work. Talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah, it is. And that's one of the things that drew me to the role. I think it's one of the few jobs in the rep industry that you can literally see your patient get better on the table. I mean, we do the surgeries most of the time awake. We do test stimulations in the surgery. And so a patient that's been tremoring for years, who maybe hasn't been able to feed themselves for years or have any type of quality life for years, they instantaneously get better on the table when we do the test.
Wow.
So, for anybody that's new in the room, or even if you've been doing it for years, I mean, that's an emotional experience for everybody, especially the patient. It's something that, you get to celebrate with them right there, and they can see what the next several years of their life are going to be like.
I can imagine. So it sounds like you really have to be grounded to be able to think clearly, be 10 steps ahead of the surgeon, be ready for anything, and even manage the emotional component that I'm sure everyone's feeling.
Yeah, emotional intelligence is a huge key to this role because you go from the neurology office to, patient support events. We talk to the patients there at their support groups. And then you go into a very intense OR environment. And so compartmentalizing and channeling those emotions is a big part of the job.
Yeah, it has to be there. Okay, what other qualities, give me maybe two more outside of emotional intelligence, would you say also need to be there?
Yeah, I think maybe this sounds, something you hear all the time with sales, but service is selling. I think there's kind of a real corny video floating around on the internet that says selling is service and service is selling. But I can't overstate that, especially with your surgeon customers. I think you can be a company that has the nicest, shiniest DBS product, and that's fine. But at the end of the day, if you can't support that, if you can't support your patient customers and your surgeon customers and your neurologist customers and really thrive in that team environment, it doesn't matter. They're going to go with, the company that serves them the best and serves their patients the best. So, customer service can never be overstated.
Definitely. No, that's wonderful. That's wonderful. Okay. Now you mentioned support groups. When I hear that, I think something outside of working, but it's part of your work. Is this something that happens on the weekends or at nights? How is that part of your regular routine?
Yeah, so, you have Parkinson's support groups and maybe epilepsy also, but, they offer services for patients in the state or around the area. And a lot of times that involves educational activities about the therapies that are available to them. So that's what we go and do, and we talk to the patients about DBS, when they're the right candidate, what surgery looks like, answer any questions, point them in the directions of maybe some providers that can help them. But yeah, that can be in the morning, that can be in the afternoon, it could be in the evening, and I've done them on weekends too. And you try to structure them, or they try to structure them around the patient's best, what we call on time with their medication, particularly in Parkinson's. So when the patient has the best movement control throughout the day, and everybody's different. So you have support groups at different times of the week.
Got it. Okay. So I know you talked about the stages when it comes to working with a team, but I still want to get a better picture of your day-to-day. Walk us through just an average day. What time are you getting up? What are you typically going to next until you finally get home?
Right. So surgery days, I have 2 to 3 of those a week. Those are typically early days. Usually I'm up by 5:30 a.m. just to make sure my bags are packed, my car is packed with the product I need. My iPads are charged up, and I have time to drink my coffee before I leave the house. And so, then it takes us to the hospital. We do the cases. And then after that, I'm usually answering emails or following up with patients on surgery days. And then there's other days of the week where I'm at the neurology office and I'm doing patient programmings or assisting them with the programmings of the patient's devices. And then, we have neurology conferences, et cetera, that we do exhibits at. So it's a little different type of sales job where you almost do a little bit of everything throughout the week.
Got it. And on the weekends, do you find yourself in cases a lot or not as much?
So that's one of the perks of DBS. It's not an emergent case. It's an elective. So you work really hard throughout the week and then you try to play hard on the weekends.
Got it. Excellent. And I can also imagine you've probably made some pretty amazing relationships with surgeons.
Yeah, that's one of the things. Most of my surgeons are, the majority of them are not much older than I am.
Sure.
So we've got to be friends and you have good relationships with them. And like I said, if you can support them and show value to them, you can't top that in a surgeon relationship. So. Got it.
And then how often do you study just in general to just stay on top of your game? Is it a daily practice for you? Is it when a particular case comes up? What does that look like for you?
Yeah, I think before any case, I try to review some, points about surgery. Maybe, each case uses a little bit different technology depending on what account I go to. But try to brush up on that before the surgery. And then if I have a week that's slow or, we have a few weeks in the summertime where surgeons are off, I try to, read through some of my study materials from training. Medtronic's really good about providing materials to stay on top of things.
Sure.
That's one of those things. I think if you want to show value as a rep and be the best out there, you for sure have to stay on top of your game.
Got it. All right. I got a tough question for you, Bryan, that I'm going to ask. I want people to understand the gravity of your role and the value that DBS gives to patients. Would you be able to just give us probably one of the most impactful cases you had, or just what happened top line in that case that really just showed you the power of the field you're working in?
Yeah, so this actually didn't happen during a case. It was post-generator placement of a patient that was a new implant. So they've had the leads implanted, and they've had the generator implanted, and they were actually at their neurology office for their initial battery programming. So the first time they were turning the whole system on, I wasn't there, but I knew she was having it done. And I got a text message about 2 hours after their appointment. And it was the patient actually texting me. And she said, if you could see my face right now, I've got tears running down my face. This is the first time I've sent a text message in 7 or 8 years. So, I mean, and that's a small thing like a text message. So you can imagine how the rest of her life was impacted.
Oh, man. That's a beautiful story. No, that's intense. That is intense. You are doing some amazing things, Bryan. More power to you. That's just lovely to hear. Okay. You've learned so many things. You talked about having emotional intelligence. You talked about really understanding the concept that sales is service and service is sales. For those that are listening that are just fascinated by this type of role and they want to prepare themselves, what would you tell them to do?
Just take extreme ownership in everything you're doing right now. No matter what happens in your day-to-day where you're at, take ownership of it, grow from that. This role is internally stressful, mentally stressful. So you kind of have to find a way to make stress your ally and grow from that. And then, as you kind of grow through the ranks, I heard this saying this morning from a video my teammate sent me, and it's new levels bring new devils. So
I like it.
Each level you go up, there's going to be something else, and you have to own that, and you have to grow from that, and you have to never stop developing yourself. It's a competitive environment, and you have to come to play hard.
Got it. When you think going further and you think about your career, maybe 5-10 years out, where do you see yourself being in regards to this role?
Yeah, so we talked about, the relationships I have with some of the surgeons and the staff. And right now, I mean, even 5 or 10 years down the road, I love this role. And I can't see not working with those people in 5 or 10 years. But fortunately, Medtronic is a great company to be at. I mean, some would consider it a destination company. And so if there's an avenue you want to pursue, the company will work with you, your DM will work with you, and they'll get you there. But for right now, I think what I'm in right now, I still have a lot to learn. Obviously, that's where I see myself several years down the road for right now.
Excellent. And then something I ask everyone, I'm going to ask you too. When you think about, if you could go back to right before you started, even being a clinical specialist, what would you tell yourself, knowing everything you know now? What advice would you give yourself right before you started that position?
Yeah, I think, my background was a little atypical coming into the role. And so I would kind of limit myself, I think, in my thinking and kind of tell myself I didn't have the experience for this or the know-how to do some of these sales tasks. But it's just not true. I mean, every job you've had, you take away some type of experience and goal building opportunities from that. So set lofty goals, think big, and just find the discipline to accomplish those goals. And there's no magic pill, no hack. You've got to work hard and take the ownership and make it happen.
Oh, that was great. And on that note, I normally ask what would be the piece of advice for the listeners, but I think you just gave it. So thank you so much for that. That was amazing. Anything else you want to share with us, Bryan?
Like I said, my role, I had kind of an atypical coming into this role. So if anybody wants to reach out to me, you can put my contact information in the show notes. I'm happy to talk to anybody anytime about my role, what I do, or other opportunities within Medtronic.
Awesome. Thank you so much for your time, Bryan. And I can't wait to hear more about how your career progresses.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Definitely. Good stuff, right? That was good stuff. The story of being able to hear from a patient that's texting for the first time after 7 or 8 years. I mean, put your mind around that. It's unbelievable. And to see the result of the work you put in at such a level, it's awesome. I'm so glad that Bryan was able to share with us and give us a taste of what it's like in the DBS division. So here's what I want to talk about before everyone goes on about their day as you're listening to the Medical Sales Podcast. Really, I mentioned it before you heard the interview. Really assess where you are right now. And it doesn't matter what it looks like. It doesn't matter if times are hard, stressed, scary, troublesome, quiet, charged, energetic, fun. wherever you are, whatever you're dealing with, whatever you're dealing in, own it. Own it and know that it is going to serve you because you're going to make it serve you. You have the power to make your current situation serve you completely. That's the level of taking extreme ownership. And that means owning your mistakes, the ones that you deliberately made, the mistakes that you accidentally made, whatever you did, whatever you're doing, whatever you've experienced, it's all part of your journey. And the sooner you can own it and take that into your storyline, the more you're going to continue to serve yourself and the more power you're going to have behind it, regardless what it was. And it sounds funny. It does sound funny, but I would challenge all the listeners out there right now to dwell on that, to really dwell on that and take extreme ownership. And I'll say it again, another thing I mentioned at the top of this episode, stress. There's so much of it right now. You can see it everywhere, from the people you talk to the bouts of road rage, to the news you turn on, to just cafeteria conversations that you might even be able to catch on a Zoom call. It's everywhere. People are stressed out because loved ones have been lost, jobs have been compromised, money has been reduced. Just the nerve, the patience of the average person has been shortened. But we do have to still find a way to continue. We have to find a way to conquer this entire scenario and still go out and make our dreams happen. We can't stop dreaming. We can't slow down. We actually have to find a way to stay empowered. And we can do that when you make stress the ally. When you really say, okay, this is happening. This is what's going on right now. This is what's stressing me out. But there is something here that I can grow from. There is something here that I can utilize, put into action. And again, it's going to serve me. And wherever I'm trying to go, this goal that I'm trying to reach, I can attain it, and I will. And this can be applied to anything you're dealing with. And of course, this especially can be applied to getting into the medical sales industry in this environment. This can be applied to promoting into a different field in this environment. This can be applied from getting a promotion from an ASR to sales rep, or from primary care to specialty. Whatever you're trying to do, whatever you're trying to create from yourself, there's an opportunity to take extreme ownership of where you are. Use that stress that it's caused. Learn what you can get from it, grow from it, and then go and make things happen. I always appreciate everyone listening to the Medical Sales Podcast. I always do my best to bring you guests that can really give us insight into how we can do what we want to do professionally, and even apply some of it to do what we want to do personally. For all of you that want to get into medical device sales or pharmaceutical sales or genetic testing or diagnostic testing, please check out the site, evolveyoursuccess.com. Follow the prompts. It's very simple. Check out the site. Take the assessment. The assessment will give you some insight into where you are as you work your process. For those of you that are interested in improving their sales skills and really trying to take where they are to a different level, check out the Sales Builder page on evolveyoursuccess.com. Thank you again for listening to the Medical Sales Podcast. And I look forward to hearing from all of you on my page, the podcast page. Remember, you can go to the podcast page and make a recording and talk about anything you'd like to hear on some upcoming episodes, and we will put it in and even sample your voice if you leave us a recording. Have an amazing week, and stay tuned for some more amazing content on the Medical Sales Podcast. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. And remember, I have a couple programs that show you exactly how to break into the medical sales industry, become a top-performing medical sales professional, and also how to masterfully navigate your career to executive-level leadership. Check out these programs and learn more at evolveyoursuccess.com. Stay tuned for more awesome content with amazing interviews.